Well, good morning, folks. This is going to be a ripper Leading Your Best Life podcast. I'm with an old mate of mine, Graham Harvey, service leadership. Graham and I go back way back. We can talk about that as we go. But this has been a long time coming. So, Graham, welcome to this Leading Your Best Life podcast.
Thanks, Leigh. Nice to see you, and well done on your swim. I was most impressed. Yes.
Thank you. What they're talking about, folks, is I did a solo crossing to Rottnest at the weekend, 20 kilometres, probably more than that by the time, with the fact that we had to go so far south with the southerly breeze pushing us north. But that's my third. I'm not going to say my last, but it was certainly one of the tough ones. But thanks for that, mate. And I will say, I won my age group, the 65 to 69 category. So I haven't won many age groups over the years. So I think my contemporaries have either died off or just given up. So there's something about persistence. You just hang in there long enough, good things happen, eh? But mate, Graham, we go way back, national speakers, a whole range of things we've done together. But let's, for the listener, talk about you, your journey. There's an accent there and there's a huge library there. We know you're a great reader. So today, Leading Your Best Life really is about two things. One, helping people, employees or business owners or managers lead their best lives, but particularly also optimizing as business owners and entrepreneurs. And of course, you've been in and around business and coaching businesses and speaking for a long time. But let's start with the Graham Harvey story. Where has Graham Harvey come from to be where he is today at age 35?
Thank you for your last kind comment. So born in New Zealand at a very early age, and then I had a great upbringing, loving mum and dad, brother and sister. My dad basically left school when he was about 14, became a motor mechanic, and then through various iterations had a very successful automotive business for many years. And so we as kids would be on the petrol pumps after school and on the weekends. It was actually a time when there was actually service at the station, different these days. So always sort of brought up in that small business entrepreneurial space, although probably was completely unaware of the impact that would have at the time. I then went to university, chose to do accounting, and in hindsight, I think the reason why I put the title accountant was because Dad's accountant seemed to get a new Jaguar every couple of years, and that seemed as good a reason as any to hitch my wagon to that star. Anyway, I went to uni, too much party, pulled out, went back, worked for a junior accountant, woke up one morning going, what the hell am I doing here? I suddenly realized it was one of those epiphanies that I'm very much a people person rather than a paper person. So then spent a number of years in the airline industry with National Airways, which is now the domestic wing of Air New Zealand. And then I was district sales manager for UTA French Airlines for a couple of years. That was interesting because it proved to me that you can actually have too much of a good thing. I think I put on 2 stone in 2 years, took copious travel agent groups to Club Med Tahiti and Nouméa and to watch the All Blacks play in France and so forth. And then went into business with some guys who were in real estate, opened a travel agency, and then got headhunted for what was then the corporate manager for Associated Travel Agencies, who were New Zealand's #1 independent travel agency at the time. That was a whole new venture for them. And then in 1982, my first wife and I, Margie was originally from WA. The recession in New Zealand was about as deep as it was here. So we decided to come to Perth. Margie to come back home and see her parents who had basically been on the farm since Rocky Gully, since whenever. And I set up a company called Silverfern International. We looked after about 20 New Zealand companies because when I was leaving New Zealand, all my corporate clients sort of said, well, what are you going to do when you go to Perth? You're going to carry on and travel? And I said, well, what else? And they said, well, we've got agents who based in Melbourne and Sydney who say they get to Perth, but we know damn well they never get past Adelaide. So I came on ahead, did some research. Anyway, the upshot of that was set up a company, Silverfern International. We're based over in Leederville, and represented about 20 New Zealand companies with their products, some on a straight agency, some on a product indent and distribution and stuff. And then in 1986, I was sold an SMI, Success Motivation Institute program, which was basically a suitcase full of, some people would remember them, cassette tapes and manuals. SMI was founded by Paul Meyer, who was the #1 insurance salesperson in the US in the 60s and 70s. The organization still exists today. It basically trades as Leadership Management International, based in Waco and Texas. And so that was so I sold Silverfern International and then set up SMI. We had offices in South Perth. I had a team at one stage I had a team of 16 sales reps working for me. And then woke up one morning as a result of the 87 crash, where suddenly no one wanted to buy $1,500 briefcases full of cassette tapes. And it wasn't long after that when I sort of woke up one morning with a net worth of $300,000. The only problem was there was a minus sign in front of it. So we had, in hindsight, I mean, at the time I was quick to sort of blame the crash, but in reality, it had nothing to do with the crash. I was over geared, wet behind the ears, was running my business on enthusiasm rather than management prowess. So it was struggle street for a while. Marriage ended. Obviously, the financial pressure put all sorts of pressure on personal stuff. But anyway, Margie and I are still very good friends these days. And then a few years, and then in the early 90s, I was also looking after all of Robert Kiyosaki's workshops here in Western Australia. And I think that's where, I think we may have met prior to that, but certainly we sort of reconnected around that time. So programs like Money and You, Creating Wealth, powerful presentations. And all this time, I basically quit my SMI distributorship in 90 and just to go fully on my own. And then late 90s decided to go back to uni and finish that degree that I never really ever started. But so I went back full time. So I was working full time, studying full time. I wrote my book during that time as well. So they were 3 extraordinarily busy but really rewarding years. And pretty much been doing that ever since, except in 2006, Melinda, my second wife, my rock, my best mate, we decided to go to Albany on the south coast of WA for a sea change. And I'd only been there a few weeks, and I got a call from a couple of old clients who'd said, "Hey, listen, the job of CEO at the Albany Chamber of Commerce has come up. Why don't you throw the hat in the ring?" And I went, "No, you reckon?" Oh, yeah. Anyway, so there was 2 or 3 of them said, "Yep." So, oh well, got to be in to win. So I did and applied and ended up 6 years as CEO of the Albany Chamber of Commerce, during which time it became the most successful Chamber of Commerce in regional Australia. We nearly doubled membership from 485 to 765 in the space of 6 years. We built state-of-the-art offices. We had annual revenues of the final year I was there. We had annual revenue of 1.3 million, which isn't too bad for a small regional chamber of commerce. That was through a chamber directory and various events. We also had an events management division and so forth. So, but then one day as I inserted a clause right at the beginning, if I wake up one morning and don't want to do this, I'd like a 3-month out clause. So we did, and I literally did wake up one morning going, you know what, it's time for a change. This place needs some fresh blood. I need to get back to, I mean, I was still doing coaching and training a little bit on the side, but essentially I was sort of missing that, and been back doing that ever since. And we've moved back.
And your business is called Service Leadership.
Yes, so originally it was called Quantum Results, and then it evolved to Service IQ and then Service EQ, because I found there was a business in New Zealand called Service IQ. But effectively, so it's very much in the leadership. So I pretty much work with business leaders who are in the service sector. Only looking at it the other day, over 95% of all my clients are in the customer facing business. So they're not
Mm,
online,
mm,
they're not in mining.
mm.
It's basically businesses that are dealing with people, people to people. And in fact, one of my mantras these days is that face to face is the new black. Um, I'm not a
Yeah.
great, so here we are having an online discussion, but
Mm.
if I've got a new client in Perth and they'll say, oh, let's do a Zoom or team, I'll go, no, make up time. I'll jump in the car. I will drive 2 hours. In fact, one day when I was in Albany, I literally drove 4 hours from Albany to Busselton for a 1 hour meeting and drove all the way back. But then at the end of the day, when you're dealing with a $40,000 contract to put all 400 people through an organizational development, it's a pretty good investment of time. So
Yeah, no, fantastic. What a journey. And that study you went back and did, that was in tourism, or what was that
yeah,
degree
so
or
I
that you
did
did?
so it was a Bachelor of Commerce at Curtin University in their
Hmm.
business school with a major in tourism management, which was was the sort of the degree that most closely aligned with my area and interest in customer service. So about 40% of my clients these days are in the tourism hospitality sector.
Yeah, right. Wow. Well, as you say, a customer facing business, and I note that point you said a people person, not a paper person. So
Yeah.
let's delve down into this then. First of all, in terms of if you're going to say, having now, I would imagine you've dealt with hundreds and well, thousands of businesses and tens of thousands of business people. What are some of the pitfalls and potholes you see in people? Again, if we're talking about people leading their best lives and building their best businesses, what are some of the common pitfalls and potholes you see people falling into that really stop them realizing their full potential? What would you say?
Great question. And it's taken probably, well, I'm about to enter my 40th year in the business. So it was
Mm,
July 86 I started. Um, I'm very strong these days on clarity of values. Um,
mm,
in fact, my signature design, deliver, delight customer experience program is spent the first 45 minutes we talk about culture and values. I mean, to me, values are the foundation stones upon which everything else is built, whether you're an individual, whether it's a business or whatever organization. Um, and getting clear around values basically then enables you to get clear in all other aspects of your life because essentially you have created the blueprint, the set of rules by which you are going to live your life, run your business, etc. So I have four values. They spell life: love, integrity, fairness, and excellence. And they sit on my desk. And because the other thing about values is that they are the filters through which essentially all decisions are made. And of course, if there's no filters, then how are you actually making great decisions? Which then leads to probably the most important part of your question, and that is the bit that I see, or the mistake that most are making, particularly in business, is in fact in my workshops, I sort of somewhat facetiously say, and I'll say, I'll be the first to raise my hand. How many of you have ever been guilty of saying, I just wish the phone would stop ringing. If I get one more email, I'll scream. If my customers would just give me some space so I can get my job done.
mm, mm,
And it's missing this realization that the customer is the purpose of our day, not the interruption to our day.
mm. Say that again.
And
The customer is the purpose of our day, not the interruption to our day. That's a tattoo, isn't it? That's a t-shirt. That's something.
absolutely. And so, um, because the bit that often gets forgotten is, as I say, again, we go through it step by step. We forget the importance that the customer plays in each of our lives because
Mm,
without a customer, we haven't got a business. If we haven't got a business, we haven't got a job. If we haven't got a job, there's no income. And if there's no income, there's no money to pay the rent, to pay the mortgage, to put clothes on your kids' back, put food on the table. So I sort of somewhat quietly say, so tonight when you're sitting down having your evening meal, why not spend 5 or 10 seconds paying homage, giving gratitude to your customers, because in reality, it's the customer that put the food in front of you right now. But we miss that connection because without the customer, nothing else happens.
You're making me think of, I saw John Hughes, the car dealer, on stage a year or so ago, and he said, I love putting smiles on customers' faces. I love that smile when people are walking out with the new car or the car they've just bought, and to put that connection and of course, and you've made the point before as well, the intrinsic motivation you got and get from the coaching. There you were as chief exec at Albany Chamber of Commerce. You could have stayed there for forever if you wanted to, but you were missing that. And I'm sure you're putting smiles on people's faces as chief exec, but there was something else missing in terms of the value you could deliver or the difference you could make or the intrinsic motivation, the juice you got actually helping people through your coaching and training. Is that right?
Absolutely. So part of the reason for moving on with the chamber, I got to the realization that I'd probably done pretty much all that I thought that I could do. You're right. They were, they were happy for me to stay on. So, but the point was, so, and the other, it's also, that's an interesting insight as well, because I see, lots of membership-based organizations floundering. And my observation is that the reason they are floundering is that because they've lost connection with the reason for the purpose of their existence. The only purpose of existence for a membership-based organization is to add value to the membership. So they go off on all these side tangents, doing this, doing that. And of course, the members look up and go, well, they get their invoice for $200, $300, $400, $500 for their annual subs. And they look at it and they go, well, what value do I get for this? And if they can't instantly articulate what the value is, well, guess what? They don't renew their membership. And it's the same thing. If we continue to focus on adding value to our customers, they will continue to, I talk about a reason to return and a reason to refer. And that only happens by continuing to add value to our customers.
Mate, you're exactly well. In my color zone sales system, in the purple patch, which is the purple zone at the back end of the sale, we talk about repeat business and referrals. R&R, as you say, reason to return and a reason to refer. Let's talk about value, because we hear people talking about this a lot. Obviously, value is something about making a difference. But let's just say, whether it be you as a coach these days or at the Chamber of Commerce, give me some examples of what you mean by, let's say at the Chamber of Commerce in the first instance, so therefore it's an organisation. What would be some examples you'd go, that's where we added value? That's what we did, or that, and what I got, and the feedback I got back in particular from some of the members was this, by saying, that's made a real difference to me and my business. Give me a couple of examples of that.
Okay, so one that sort of immediately jumps to mind is one of the things that we did was, and again, it's not peculiar to the Albany Chamber, but most chambers of commerce typically have a monthly business after hours, business after 5, or something along those lines. And there are a couple of things. First of all, we used to have it always on the third Wednesday of the month. That was non-negotiable. So locally, we sort of owned that space. No one else would bother booking a time or a meeting on the third Wednesday of the month between 5:30 and 7:30, because that was our space. We claimed it and we defended it. And because of that, we used to always have a lot of out-of-towners who would schedule their reps visits to Albany on that particular date. And so in the halcyon days, we were averaging over 200 people per month at our monthly networking event. In fact, at the time, I forget his name, he was the CEO of the Midwest Chambers. We used to have this monthly competition as to who had more people at our monthly business after hours. But what it was, and the other thing too is that it was business leaders and business owners who were attending. So you would catch up, and so it was very much a strong, it was there as primarily as a networking event. But one incident springs to mind where a colleague who I said to him one day, I said, I'll never see you at, he was a member, but I said, I'll never see you at business after hours. And he goes, well, it's all about booze and schmooze, and, I've got sort of better things to do. And I said, well, you might be surprised it has a bit more value to it than that. I said, why don't you come along tonight? And I remember exactly where it was on the night. And he rang me the next day and he said, count me in for business after hours every month. He said, I've been trying to get a meeting with the mayor for a number of months. And he was there last night because we used to get the mayor and councillors would turn up. And he said, I managed to get to talk to him and I've got a meeting with him on Friday.
Beautiful.
And so it's one of those things in the moment. So the value to that particular person was actually making a connection with someone that otherwise would not have been there. One of the other things that we did way back in 2007 was we created what we called the Women's Leadership Forum, which effectively was, I mean, because workshops specifically for women business owners, well, essentially didn't exist then. And so that still runs to this very day, where they have an annual day where they get outside speakers in. And so again, it's identifying. One of the other things we used to do was also invite people in. So some members would sit down with members, just invite them in for like a bit of a small focus group, for want of a better name, and just ask them a simple question like, how can we add value to your membership? And just shut up and listen. So sometimes we don't know what value to add to our clients or customers because we never ask them. And so it's just, so I'm a very strong advocate with my clients. You've got to have those regular meetings, not particularly formal structures, but just, and the other thing that I'm a great advocate of, and you know that you've heard me say this before, I'm a great fan of a how's things call. Driving past someone's business, drop in. I was in the neighborhood, just called in to say hi. No particular purpose or pick up the phone. I mean, my good friend Keith Abraham, he will tell you openly that what he attributes a huge amount of his success to is that every day he rings 7 clients, and it's virtually a how's things call. Oh, I'm glad you called. I was only thinking about it the other day. Listen, we've got a conference workshop. We need some help, yada, yada, yada. But had you not picked up the phone or dropped in, probably nothing would have happened. So it's, this is, I guess the reverse of that is we see in the FIFO sector, the divorce rates are higher than usual. Why? Well, because it's hard to have a relationship when you're not physically in the same space. No different with your customers. It's hard to maintain that relationships when you're physically never present.
The proximity.
Yeah.
Proximity factor.
Absolutely. So
let's talk about your training and coaching. And while we do it, just to give people some context, I'll go to your LinkedIn page so that people can know where you are and what you're doing, just to give it some context there. So here, Graham Harvey CSP service leadership, coaching leaders and their teams to design cultures of service excellence to deliver standout customer experiences every time to delight every customer. So let's talk about a couple of case studies, 2 or 3 case studies of people who you've been coaching, could be in recent times or not so recent times, to talk about what value you added, what difference you made to their lives. What were they doing before and what happened so that you then did some value adding and transformation?
Okay, I'm happy to share a couple of stories. One of them is, and I have a written testimonial from him, which I can pull up, but Rob and Karen Goff own Settlers Tavern in Margaret River, which would be familiar to many of your listeners, viewers. I first met Rob at a hospitality expo organised by the Hotels Association. Must be at least 10, 12 years ago now. And as a result, Rob came up to me, here's my card, give me a call. We got together. I then delivered delight to his senior leadership team in Margaret River. And then as a result of that, I did some one-on-one coaching with Rob. Now, you only need to go to the Settlers website to have a look at the numerous awards that they have won over the years in terms of best regional pub, best casual dining, best wine list in Australia, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, effectively, Rob and Karen probably could have done that without my assistance, but it just shows that people who are at the top of their game, they are the ones who generally are looking to get better and better and better. Honestly, Leigh, not a week goes by that I don't get a call or an email from someone saying, Harves, you really need to go and talk to these people. They really need your help. And I go, you know what? It's actually a waste of time and oxygen because the people who most need to be in the room never are. They're
Mm.
always so focused on doing something else that seems, they pay lip service to customer service, but they don't actually invest the time or the money in their people to get better and better at what they do. So, for instance, Rob has done design, deliver, delight. It must be at least 5 or 6 times. So I run the design, deliver, delight in a public forum. So I'm actually had Bunbury Margaret River last week. I'm in Perth this week. And every time it's in Margaret River, Rob is in the room and he always brings 5 or 6 of his people with him. And being in hospitality, it's relatively transient. So there's always new people coming and going. And he said, it's some people say, oh, yeah, I don't need to come. I did your program back in 2005. So, okay, that's fine. That's good. I said, so you only go to the gym once? And they go, pardon? I said,
Mm.
well, it's the same thing. And if you look at, then I use the examples of, and Rob's very much on board with the regular training that he does with his people. He doesn't just do it with me. There's an organization he works with in Melbourne. He brings them over virtually every second year where they do some very detailed leadership training with his team. So he's a big investor he understands one of the truisms of business. If you want to grow your business, you have to grow your people.
Mm.
And that's the
Mm.
missing link that so many other businesses have. So,
Mm.
so working with Rob, he's always looking to fine tune things, and it's just constant. And the other thing about Rob is that he's effectively on the floor every day, in just basically leading his people by example.
Mm.
But the main thing is that he continues to invest in his people. So in Margaret River last week, 5 of his senior leadership team were in the room, including his new venue manager. So again, it's just this constant investment in people. One of my coaching clients at the moment is a young guy. I won't give you too much detail other than say he's 28. He's extraordinarily talented at what he does, and he's sort of had a number of different offers. Well, the interesting thing is that again, can't give you too much detail,
Mm.
but he's 29. He's basically a tradesperson. And in 2 months' time, he starts a $400,000 year position in an overseas country on a 2-year contract. Why? Because we took the time to actually get clear what was important to him, what was important to his family, and what did he need to do to get from point A to point B. So so for him, it was clarity of values, clarity of vision, and then clarifying the steps that he needed to take to get to where it was that he wanted to actually do. And having somebody essentially, because coaching, as you will know, coaching in its purest form is purely questioning. It's a
Mm.
questioning process.
Mm. Mm.
It's not advisory or like a consultant is, and it's not counseling. Coaching is a specific discipline, and as Einstein said, don't go to the person that has the answers, go to the person that has the questions. And
Mm.
that's what coaching is all about. It's about
Mm.
the capacity to ask the right questions that enables people to get clear in the answers that they give.
Well,
So
as you say, way back in the Money and You days, one of the mantras was clarity is power. Clarity is
absolutely,
power. When you get the clarity, you now have power to, like a laser beam, focused on the goal of where I'm heading.
absolutely. So after every coaching session, I always write up my notes and I send off the notes within 48 hours to each coaching session. And at the top of each note is exactly that statement, clarity leads to power. It's
Mm.
got the person's name, the date, and underneath it in big bold letters, clarity leads to power.
Mm.
And that's really what questioning is. It's just about getting clear. And of course,
Mm.
the clarity of values is fundamental to answering those questions because you've got the filters in place through which to run those questions.
No, as you say, clarity leads to power, which is, again, you've made that point that Rob leads by example by being out on the floor on a daily basis. Not only that, he doesn't just send people to your program, he's in the program with you. Now
Absolutely.
let's just talk about that, the
Mm.
dynamics that happen where the leader comes to the program, and not only comes to the program once, twice, 3 or 4 times. Why does he come to the program? What benefit does he get coming to the program? What goes on in that meeting when he's sitting with 4 or 5 of his team versus he sends 4 or 5 people to the program but doesn't come himself? What's the difference?
Okay, so there's a great quote, and I'm going to see if I can pull it off right now. It's a book. It's a great book. It's called Fabled Service. It's all about Nordstrom, the famous retailer in America. And
Yes.
a great quote from Bruce Nordstrom, who's sadly recently passed, but effectively he made the quote around where
You're such a
interesting.
prolific reader.
Interesting. Here's a quote from Albert Schweitzer that's just jumped off the page.
Yes.
There is no higher religion than human service. To work for the common good is the greatest religion. But
Yeah.
what he talks about is, see if I can find it here. There's a quote from Walton that great leaders are what they want their companies to become. That was from Sam Walton of Walmart fame. But the one that I'm looking for is, he says, and this is the answer to your question about Rob, the most effective leadership I could exercise was not in what I said, no matter how compellingly, but in how I acted. So, and again, having watched John Hughes again, like he said, I will never ask my customers, my staff to do anything that I'm not still prepared to do myself.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I remember him, we were both sharing the platform at this on the same conference, and he said, very philosophically, but so true. He said, I am first to work in the morning to turn the lights on so my staff don't work in darkness. That's what service leadership is all about. The leaders are prepared to be the living, breathing example of what it is that they expect in others.
Yeah.
So I remember it was a motor dealership once where I got invited. They wanted to do some customer service training for their front office staff. So I asked the question of the dealer principal. I said, "Who of the senior management's going to be in the room?" He said, "Oh, none of us." He said, "The problem's at the front counter." And I said, "Sorry, not interested." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Customer service starts in the boardroom, not at the front counter." And I said, "You're going to have people going to my workshop, bringing back new learning into an environment that's completely unaccepting of that learning." I said, "If there are no senior management in the room, then that would be in violation of my value of integrity, and I will walk away," which I did.
Fantastic. But as you say, you're putting good seed in toxic soil. You've got
Absolutely.
great ideas, but in a toxic culture, you're still going to kill the seed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So answering your question, so Rob is just basically doing the example that he sets for his team.
Yeah. Yeah. And look,
He's not beyond continued learning, which is what he's saying to them.
but the other great thing that happens in the room, and just as you and I at that summit the other day, is ideas come to you in that environment that wouldn't have been fostered in some other environment. There's, that if you think about the spirit of the mastermind, that there's all this brain power in the room, and you're sparking all this thinking. And so for Rob to be in the room, particularly not only with the existing managers who are seeing the program for the second or third time, but the new person, you've got this incredibly fertile intellectual environment going on. Ideas are coming, and they will talk about topics and come up with ideas and action points in your room that they won't have come up with if they were sitting back in the boardroom or the meeting room at the Margaret River Tavern or wherever they happen to be. So there's something quite magical happens in that learning environment, particularly when 3 or 4 or 5 people from a workplace go to an event like yours versus, again, the problem with only one person going is they've got to come back and who knows what the environment's like. Whereas, again, he's already created a fertile environment, but one, he's leading by example, but two, they are coming back with ideas already fired up and probably half an action plan already formed as a result of being in your room. So let alone whatever content that they actually absorb or get from the Design, Deliver, Delight program. Would you agree with your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. And the other thing too is that not only do they get ideas from one another, particularly in the public workshops. I mean, every time I run one, I come away with new ideas because you've also got a mixture of people in the room from various backgrounds. So over the last couple of weeks, I've had people from real estate, local government, optometry, a landscaping business. We had a couple of health practitioners. There was some hospitality in terms of accommodation. So again, you get this whole cross section of people, and sometimes it's in them asking a question about their specific business, and then someone goes, "Oh, I never thought of that," or "I've never looked at it," because again, people are looking at life through their own prisms, which is their knowns, which is around themselves and their business. So when someone comes and goes, well, why couldn't we possibly do that? We're having a discussion the other day about QR codes, and people sometimes think, oh, I'm in business and QR code's a new thing. Well, I need to incorporate the QR code. And then we have a discussion. Okay, so then coming in the coaching, my questioning. So, okay, so those are the upside. What's the downside of a QR code? And then you have people like Rob, and then also my good friend Les and Susie Palmer, who have got the Rustlers Steakhouse in Albany. A specific decision not to go with QR codes. Why? Because you reduce the human contact. Instead of people just punching in on their phone, they can say, well, the special of tonight is, what about this sauce? And what about that sauce? And what about this? And what about that? So you miss all that when you're trying to do something on a screen or via a QR code. So
Yes, yeah.
again, it's about having that open discussion around all the pluses and minuses and what people are doing in different. I mean, as an example, I just finished a big program with the city of Kalgoorlie, and it may surprise you, but one of the things that came out of it was, because in my program, I talk about the six senses of service. So I talk about a customer experience is a combination of everything that your customers see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and how do they emotionally and viscerally connect with your people, your products, and your services. So as a result of that, one of the ladies in customer service again showed some initiative. They have now at the city of Kalgoorlie, they now have their own signature scent customized in the foyer when you walk into their place of business.
Wow.
Taken from an idea that I shared around Ritz-Carlton and other places as well, who again also have their signature scents in the foyers of their respective businesses.
Clever. That's subtle indeed, but super powerful. And that's Cialdini's persuasion, and it's NLP anchoring. So they're associating that smell with that place, and you're creating an experience. Now, just on that, over the years, you're talking. Yes, we overlap in our area here. We talk about my R factor, which came out of obviously my Color Zone sales system. But this one particular piece of data, which I'm sure you've seen over the years, I think it came from a Tom Peters book where he was talking about, obviously that's the Color Zone system, building the relationship. But this stat, why clients do not return or recommend, 15% because they find a better product, 15% because they find a cheaper product or solution, 20% because of too little contact and individual attention, and 49% because the quality they got was poor quality. In other words, almost 70% of the reason someone doesn't come back has got nothing to do with the price or the actual product, but the frequency times quality of contact. And so what you're saying right there is the scent, the building that another touch point, a chance to build the relationship, In fact, that's how I then developed this formula. That's the other stat. The banker that reported the typical business loses 15 to 20% of its customers each year. Halving this loss can double the company's growth rate. So, I've been teaching this for 20 or 30 years now. The relationship is frequency times quality of contact, where quality of contact is friendliness times value. And what you're saying there is that touch point. Yes, we can have a QR code, but when I have a human being, but we can have a far more quality, friendly contact, and then of course we can answer questions and build a relationship, versus we can save money. So your comments on that?
Yeah, we're human beings. We are social beings. I
Yeah,
mean, you look at all the longevity factors about people. One of the keys to longevity is the degree of social interaction.
yeah, yeah.
And it's just, Mark McCormick and his stuff, the International Management Group looks after Wimbledon, US Masters, golf, etc., etc. Basically talks about if you're selling a service, you're selling a relationship.
Mm,
And
mm,
unfortunately, so many businesses have become transactional rather than relational.
mm, mm,
So
mm.
again, what are those fundamentals of a relationship? It's the clarity of the values and the strength of the emotion. I
Yeah,
mean, the other bit that we forget is that um, yeah, most buying decisions are more emotional than rational.
yes.
And I asked that as an example. And said, if you need evidence of that, go home tonight, open up your wardrobe, and go through item by item and ask yourself this question: did I purchase this piece of clothing for rational reasons or emotional reasons?
Mm,
And
mm.
everyone just laughs because they know damn well that it's 99% emotional.
Right. Tell me about it. I've got so many T-shirts. So whenever I'm in a music bar in Croatia or overseas, I've got all these jazz and band because I want to remember this moment. I want to get it. I've got all these bloody
Yeah,
T-shirts I don't need. They were made purely on emotion, and hats as well. Crazy.
absolutely.
Now that all
Absolutely.
those books behind you talking about investing in yourself,
Yeah.
and learning. Clearly, you're a reader. Tell me about your reading program. I know you're a very disciplined reader. So talk about routine. What is your daily, weekly, monthly routine? And do you have reading goals? Do you have a reading schedule? Do you have a reading system? Tell me about it. Let's get inside the Graham Harvey reading learning brain.
Okay. So it was 1985. I was attending a Jim Rohn seminar at the Parmelia Hilton, and he quoted Harry S. Truman. I love trivia. Do you know what the S stands for in Harry S. Truman?
No,
Nothing. It's just an initial. He wanted an initial, so he
you
added.
like it was better than Harry K. Truman, Harry S.
Yeah.
Truman.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so the point was, and he said the quote from Truman was that readers aren't always leaders, but leaders are always readers.
yeah, yeah.
And so that was sort of started the commitment. And so this might surprise you. I actually don't have a specific routine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but what I do is because these days I probably spend as much time listening to audiobooks as I do physically reading. But
Mm,
so one of the routines that I do, if something piques my curiosity. So for instance, I've just got Martha Beck's. Martha Beck's become a recent author fan. She wrote the Key to Integrity, and her new book is called Beyond Anxiety. So what I will often do now, because I've been a member of Audible for, well, I think I've got nearly 200 books on my Audible library on my phone.
wow,
But so
wow.
I just do the monthly things. I divide that by 12. I still buy the occasional credit, like I did the other day with one with the book. And so so I was listening to her podcast. She was talking about it, so I got it on Audible, listened to it, and then what typically happens with the good ones is then I go and buy the hard copy. So then I can refer to. So for instance, it took me a while to find it. I've been a great fan of Tom Peters for many years. I've probably
Mm,
got, I'm looking over at my library, probably 20 of his books over the years. And one that I didn't have was The Excellence Dividend. And I was listening to it on Audible, and I listened to it the second time. So then I managed to find one online because it was, I think, published in 2018, so they become a little bit hard to procure. And then I'll go through and put post-it notes and highlight and bits and pieces and stuff. So I can't remember the last book that I've actually physically read from cover to cover, but I've certainly listened to many on Audible from, if you like, cover to cover. And some of them, like Atomic Habits, I've probably listened to 3 times, because, and the other book I've listened to several times. So with my new coaching clients, they receive 2 books as part of the program. One of them is Atomic Habits from James Clear, and the other one is Legacy by James Kerr, who was the English journo who embedded himself with the New Zealand All Blacks for a number of months. So his book is called it's James Kerr Legacy, What the All Blacks Can Teach Us About the Business of Life. Because at the beginning of my
no dickheads is one of the rules, right?
yeah, no dickheads, or front up, or go home.
Yeah. And leave the jumper in a better place than you found it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's sort of the introduction to clients regarding the importance of values, and then I talk about,
yeah.
So the 3 questions the question I have at the beginning of my workshop is, because I've got to throw up the logos of Apple, the All Blacks, and Harvard, and having this open discussion about what makes them great, and it basically comes full circle to clarity of values. Those values. In fact, last night I was watching a new movie on Netflix called Conquering Taniwha. Now, Taniwha is effectively the Maori water serpent, and I only watched the first episode, but it's about the Waikato Chiefs, who are based in Hamilton, which is my hometown in New Zealand. And they've won the first 2 games of this season's Super Rugby, and it talks about mana. So mana in Maori is about spirit, it's about heart, and it's about the thing they talk about that the Chiefs have as a rugby team is the degree of mana that they have as a team. And because when push comes to shove, it's that invisible mana that actually binds.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then we talked about Apple, how, from 1976, 2 guys tinkering with some electronics in their dad's garage to becoming the world's most valuable company. Last week, I checked, $3.4 trillion in value. So that's 12 zeros. And here's the interesting thing that sometimes gets missed about Apple, is that Apple, or Steve Jobs, was never the darling of Wall Street, because Wall Street were always on his case about driving 90-day returns, and to, as he would say, I don't give a flying F about 90-day returns. I'm building a company for the long term, and my focus is on building the world's best products supported by the world's best service. Wall Street, go to hell, not interested in you. And as a result of that attitude, they've built the most valuable company in the world. And so one of the things that gets me going sometimes is the people who continue to drink Milton Friedman's Kool-Aid, that the purpose of a business is to maximize return for its shareholders. Well, the bit that they miss is that the only way of doing that is to increase the value to your customers, because it's the customers who are creating the return. But it drives me nuts when people just can't see that.
Yeah, exactly. And also the customer's some dumb thing you can manipulate that's a pawn at the end of the whole equation, rather than, which again, as you say, Sam Walton talks about, the customer is at the center of our business, or it is about putting the smiles on the faces. So talking about driving you nuts, let's talk about what motivates Graham Harvey. Here you are at the age you're at right now. What motivates you to do what you do, and why?
Okay. So one of the other things I talk about is, I've got another quote to come here for. As you know, I love quotes. Anyway, so the thing talks about is, where's he gone?
Standing on this, while you're finding that, standing on the shoulders of giants, talking of quotes, the reason I've seen so far is because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. I mean, that's why we read and listen to podcasts. We are not the smartest people in the room. We are in many ways just a mouthpiece for all of those way smarter people that have gone before us. And of course, having spent all that time with Kiyosaki and Blair Singer and others, I mean, certainly in my case, I'm sure you as well, the teaching process is to create a learning environment, to create a room where people are discovering answers for themselves and walking away committed to take action to transform themselves and their businesses. That's what you and I have done for over 40 years.
Yep.
We've been ignited by those guys. And so it's not just about knowledge, it's about creating a learning environment where people walk away with actions and blueprints to literally committed to take action. So having found that quote, standing on the shoulders of giants there, what's the quote that motivated you around what motivates you?
Okay, so it came down to, I don't know where that was an actual point in time, but I woke up one sort of day thinking, getting some clarity around, I think it was started off by investigating what is happiness. And then out of that sort of evolved these distinctions around the difference between happiness and pleasure and joy. And what I came to the conclusion of was that me primarily, which then observation and most others, we don't have a distinction between pleasure and joy. So in simplistic terms, and I think there's one of my newsletters is on it, is that essentially pleasure is as a result of the serving of self through the satiating of our own personal senses. Now, the downside of pleasure is that every pleasure you can think of, whether it be alcohol, whether it can be sex, it can be whatever it is, the unfortunate thing is they can all end up in addiction.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing as addiction to joy. And so, because joy comes through not the service of self, but the service to others. So the quote is from Rabindranath Tagore, who was actually an Indian philosopher, who was a good friend of Einstein's. As he said, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." So, and Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And so, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've been now running, and it's nearly 18 years since I first put Design, Deliver, Delight together. And I still, as I say, I had twice last week. I'm in Perth on this Wednesday. And reflecting on Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's classic flow, I am in flow when I present that workshop. Time
nice.
is regardless. And it just brings me so much joy because I know the difference that it's making to the people that are in the room. And how do I know I'm making a difference is because they tell me.
Yeah, beautiful, mate.
Beautiful. It's like the emails the following day. Thank you so much for yesterday. Got this distinction, got this, da 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 da. Suddenly the tumblers clicked and so forth.
Right.
That's
Beautiful.
yeah.
You're in the
yeah.
That's one of the books on my Audible at the moment is Csikszentmihalyi's flow book. And there's been a lot of talk of it of like, how do we help get people into flow? It's so great to hear that you're in flow doing that. What's a couple of books you're reading at the moment? It's always great to hear what people are either listening to or reading. What are a couple of things that are stimulating you right now?
Well, one
he's always going across
the
his library.
The one that I've got, which I said I'd put.
Yes, Beyond Anxiety.
Martha Beck's Beyond Anxiety. The one interesting. So I've generally probably got 2 or 3 on the go at any one time.
Yes.
Because sometimes you just it's almost like what book am I in the mood to read?
Yes.
So I read a lot of books on around ethics and values, surprise, surprise. But if I'm just looking up at my I've got most of Bucky Fuller's books. We haven't talked about Bucky, but
No.
Buckminster Fuller was probably my greatest mentor, which I was thankfully introduced to through originally with Money and You. And one of the greatest weeks of my life was at a specially arranged business school in Hawaii, where we spent 7 days going through, I can't remember how many hours it was, of Bucky on video, which was taken at Big Sur back in the late 70s. And we would watch 2 minutes and then we would discuss it and everything else. So the principles of Buckminster Fuller, because again, I'm sort of a slight my interpretation of Bucky's work for me is through a quote that I have, which is, "Without integrity, one has nothing."
Mm.
So that's what comes back. So, and I like, and as Bucky often says, I know more than most people because I've made more mistakes than anyone else. And sometimes, and that's another book I've just finished reading, is the right type of wrong, which is Amy Edmondson's book. She also wrote another must read for your listeners is The Fearless Organization, which is all about psychological safety. She's basically the one that has recoined the phrase psychological safety, where businesses create workplaces where where the workplace is devoid of humiliation, retribution, where people are inspired, they're supported. And I guess that's what Rob's created at Settlers Tavern. He has a very psychological safe where people have got ideas, you can bring them forward. Doesn't mean to say every idea is going to be implemented, but that will be accepted with grace, that people will understand it. They will toss it around, and if it works, they will implement it.
Well, you're talking about a principle, again, from Bucky and Money and You, the concept of the fruit bowl, the
Yep.
context, the culture, and then, as you said, the fruit, the bananas, the grapes, the strawberries, the apples, the oranges. People are different, all these different personalities, different. You slap them in under the one roof, whether it be Settlers Tavern or whatever, say, we expect you to work together. Well, there needs to be a context which the unenlightened leader has no understanding of. How they set that context was obviously, so guys like Rob, the All Blacks, and others are very strong around setting a context.
Yep.
Brian Cook, as chief exec at Carlton, has been very good at Collingwood, not Collingwood, at Geelong and Carlton, other places, setting that fruit bowl of what are our objectives, what are our values, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, how do we give feedback. And certainly, if your ego's so big you think you're bigger than the club or the team, then you're going to either have your ego put in check or you won't be around, because we want harmony, which is another point of Fuller, which is synergy, synchronized energy.
Yep.
So critical. So many of those fantastic principles of Bucky Fuller, synergy. Just a concept. Talk about Fuller and synergy for just a second while we're on that.
Yeah, well, see, a lot of people think synergy is just simply the whole is the greater than the sum of the parts. But he actually talked about, he said, essentially, synergy is where the whole is unpredictable by the makeup of the parts. So he talks about, and I won't quote it exactly, where you take you might take the tensile strength of 3 different metals and you add them up and say it comes to 100. But when you combine the metals together, the tensile strength suddenly becomes 200. Now, that wasn't identifiable if you looked at the individual attributes of the 3 individual metals.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that happens in teams, where you bring, you have one person has an idea and a second person has an idea, and then suddenly out of the ether pops a third idea that would not have arisen had the first 2 people not submitted their differing ideas.
Yes.
That synergy in place.
Yes. And so one of the other book, talking of books, Dimmicks were a client of mine, and I ended up buying a whole pile of books while I was sitting there waiting for Bill Leigh, the chief exec, to finish a meeting, and I'd always see a book and get it. But one of them was The Inner Game of Golf and The Inner Game of Tennis. They talk about performance equals potential minus interference. And so where you can take the interference out, or minimize interference and friction, increase the harmony factor. Not to say that you can't have differing opinions, but a way of how do I respectfully disagree, use data versus, as you say, use bullying, intimidation, loudest voice, any of those things, and increase performance because I've minimized friction, maximized harmony and therefore performance. So, mate, I'm conscious of our time. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions here.
Yep.
What does the future look like for Graham Harvey? We talked about your past journey, where you are now. What's next for you? What's going on the horizon?
Good question. I often get, because I'll be 73 in September, and people say, "When are you going to go? When are you going to retire?" And I go, "I'm sorry, I have no concept of what retirement is." I mean,
Yeah,
I just simply go, "What would I do?"
yeah,
And I mean, people have got total freedom and prerogative to run their lives the way they wish to, but
mm,
I just find it sometimes depressing where I sort of walk past a cafe and there's people sitting there, many of them younger than I, sitting at the same table, drinking the same cup of coffee, talking the same crap that they talked to the same people yesterday.
yeah.
That to me is not living. I mean, there's so many more books to read, there's so many businesses, so many people to talk to, and I work from home. I've got a loving wife. I've got three great kids. I've got seven great grandies. Um, you just get to the point where I'm not, never been particularly materialistic. Um, it's life to me is more what's happening on the inside, not what's happening on the outside. And,
Mm.
I'll be staying with my daughter and two grandies in Perth tomorrow night. And Um, there's something about two young kids coming and jumping in your bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, having cuddles with granddad. Um, you can keep your limousines and mansions because that to me is priceless.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Now, funny you should say that. One of the guys I was in the Cottesloe Crooners. One of the guys, and he said to me, I couldn't believe it when I came and joined all these guys. And really, the purpose of the Crooners is for guys who have been retired or semi-retired they get together for mental health reasons. Just to
Yep.
the singing's one thing, but it's actually the connection which is far more important. And this guy Ross said to me, he said, "Leigh, I can't believe it. All these guys, so many of these guys are so rich in the outside world, but so poor in the inner world." And I
Yep.
went, "Oh boy, that's it." And the choir helps them discover some joy internally, which living in the best house with all these boats and cars doesn't do it. It's the intrinsic motivation, and you've said about it here, the flow that you're in when you're running that workshop. Why would you stop doing it? At the same time, why does Warren Buffett not stop work? Why doesn't he play golf or go out onto the boat
Yeah.
every day, or Rupert Murdoch, or a whole range of people? Because the flow and the connection is the work he does and what he's loved doing for all these other years. So just on that, if I was to ask you, if you were to go and meet the 13-year-old Graham Harvey now, what would be two or three key tips or tools that you'd recommend or say? What would you say to that young 13-year-old Graham Harvey?
I'd recall the words that Paul Meyer gave to me in a private dining room at the Braxos Club in Waco, Texas in October 1988.
Mm,
And it probably took me at least another 20 years of him saying that to finally understood what it actually meant. And
mhm,
the advice that I would give a 13-year-old Graham Harvey would be, whatever someone thinks of you is none of your damn business.
mm, mm,
Which is
mm,
interesting because another one of my podcasts that I watch is Dr. Michael Gervais talks about um, his podcast is called Finding Mastery, and in his book, which I think is on my bedside, he talks about the yeah the key to mastery is um, he talks about FOPO, fear of other people's opinions.
mm,
And so that to me is, in hindsight, if I look back over the years, the biggest barrier that got in the way of me doing the stuff that I was ultimately more capable of doing at the time than I perhaps achieved, was looking at things through the filter of what will others think.
mm,
At the end of
mm.
the day, it matters not.
Popo, what a waste.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, set your dreams, get on with it, and use the naysayers' comments as fuel, not as a barrier.
Correct, mate. Hey, listen, I love going back over my notes when I'm looking at these. I'm taking a ton of notes when we do these things. So let's just do this. Um, there you were, young Graham Harvey. We say the forest shapes the tree, and so that ecosystem, as you said at the time, you didn't realise working in your dad's business and helping out in your dad's business, seeing self-employment and seeing self-determination at work.
Yep.
What an impact that had for you. And so you do accounting because you see the accountant drives a Jaguar. That seems to be a good idea. And then you see that you're actually a people person, not a paper person, and you end up sales manager, travel agency, SMI leading to LMI, Silver Fern International. But then you learn something which I can relate to: overgeared, wet behind the ears, but full of enthusiasm. A very dangerous, but dangerous cocktail. But I think many of us in our own businesses have gone through that journey. Um, but there you are, chief exec at Albany Chamber of Commerce, doubling memberships, creating a whole lot of difference down there. And as you say, our common time, particularly in and around the money and you and the Kiyosaki and the Bucky Fuller time. And I love that. Return and refer. The customer. Yes, you're a specialist in customer facing businesses. I like that, mate. And then, as you say, clarity of values, because that's so important in customer facing businesses. Just as an aside, podcast I did just last week with a guy called Pete Carboni. He set up a rec lab. It's a rec lab. It's cold plunges, spa, sauna. So very much about recovering from sport. But he got the idea, or not even got that idea, but he did an ayahuasca course down in Peru. And the shaman said to him at the age of 24, "You're going to be a healer." And at the time he went, "What the hell? That's just ridiculous." He said, "I went on the grog and misbehaved for another 3 months." But here he is now in his mid to late 30s. Very clear that that's exactly where his future is, and he's creating a whole ecosystem there, which includes, as he's saying, he's built this first one. It'll organically grow to 2, then 3, then 4, and the challenge will be to capture that interpersonal, the eyeball to eyeball relationships he's building with his customers, and transferring that to his staff and other managers. So that he can literally leverage and scale that, because it's leveraging and scaling the experience. Because as you know, you can build the Margaret River Tavern, but it's just a physical facility. It's the energy and the experience that you're teaching people to design, deliver, and delight by. And that's going to be Pete's challenge as a young entrepreneur. People at the top of their game are the ones who are always getting better.
Yeah.
How bizarre. And of course, our mutual friend Glenn Capelli introduced me to the term Kaizen, the Japanese continuous and never-ending improvement, which is what you're doing, is help people create ongoing improvements in customer experience. And your point here, ask your customer, what can we do to add more value for you? Ask the customer. The great ideas that come there. I love what you said, Keith Abraham, 7 how's things going calls a day. What a difference that makes. It's another R factor principle of radiating to attract. Grow your people, grow your business. Rob invests in his people and leads by example. I love your idea of giving books, the Atomic Habits and the All Blacks Legacy book. What 2 fantastic books that can transform lives. At the same time, you're scaling. It saves you having to teach it. When they're discovering, when the client's discovering for themselves. But I particularly love this one: mana, spirit, heart. How that makes all the difference. And then your other point, mind you, I made a note here, mate. The number of times you've said in this interview, "I woke up one day and," how those life transforming moments when I woke up with this thought, they need a new person at the chamber, or whatever that. There's been a number of "I woke up one day ands" in here today. And your point, pleasure is satiating self, joy, service of others. Lose yourself in the service of others. And then that final point, FOPO, what a waste of energy that is. Fear of other people's opinion. Mate, absolutely fantastic. And of course, I love the fact you've said you're in flow when you're presenting that workshop. In flow when you're presenting that workshop. Mate, what a fantastic set of lessons to help business owners and anyone lead their best life. Is there anything you'd like to add to that or conclude with before we wrap up?
I think we've had a pretty in-depth discussion about the ideas that bind us, because I know that I doubt that we would still be in contact after all these years if we didn't share some common bonds, and a lot of that's around our. In fact, it was interesting. I was just on Facebook yesterday talking about the. It was about the drop in Tesla sales around the world,
Yeah.
and I made the comment. It was like, uh, "Are you doing business with businesses that align with your own personal values?"
Mm,
And
mm.
that's what's happening with the decline in Tesla. It's like, it's like they might have a good car, but I don't align with his principles and his values. So I will just vote with my feet and go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for the first time ever in the UK, one of the Chinese electric vehicle brands has tipped Tesla. And I think that right now, if I was a Tesla shareholder, I'd be pretty pissed about what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
again, it comes down to, and like I've got a call once from I'll leave the name out of it. It was an organization, and they said, "Can you come and do it?" And I said, "Yes, I can." I said, "But I won't." And they said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because let's just put it this way: my values don't align with yours.
Mm, mm,
I do
mm,
not support the product that you're creating and selling, so I will respectfully decline. Thank you."
No,
And
that's
then you
happened to
just,
me too.
yeah,
I
and
went,
then you just, yeah,
mm.
yeah,
I had exactly the same situation with an organization where I went, yeah, I'll get a fee out of this, but I have to sleep with myself each night with,
yeah,
that I've actually facilitated what that group do on a daily basis,
yeah,
which is just, in my opinion, outrageous. So
yeah,
the same thing. You got to sleep. At the end of the day, so you got to sleep with yourself at the end of the day. Graham,
yeah.
what a fantastic interview we've had, mate. And of course, you reminded me that, of course, I sat with you in the office down at the Albany Chamber of Commerce. It must have been, God knows when, 2000. When were you there? Because remember, I
I
sat
was
with my
there from
little,
2007 till 2013. Yeah.
right. So somewhere in that period, we did.
Mm.
There's a little recording of us way back sitting in that office with my little MP3 recorder. So we've
Yeah, I've
advanced a
forgotten
little
about
bit.
that. I've
Hey,
forgotten about that. I've
yeah,
forgotten
it's
about that. Yeah.
a long time ago, Mike. What
Yeah.
a pleasure, and I think back also to all the wonderful times you as treasurer of the national speakers here in WA, and me as president, and of course you went
Yep.
on later to be president as well.
Yeah.
I think, talk about 1+1 is 3. We did a pretty bloody good job together, mate.
Absolutely.
You were so helpful to me, because at times my brain's running off in the clouds, and you both on the financial side and the systems side. So I thank you for those days as well, mate. So thank you again for this, and people can touch base with you via your LinkedIn page. I'll put that link in the notes when we get going, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon, my friend. I say namaste.
Cheers. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you, mate. See you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Leigh.